You didn't back away. That means something, Desmond replied, his heart racing, his resolve tightening like a noose around the truth they were both afraid to face. As the weight of their choices hung between them, what they had discovered, and what could lie ahead, Laelani's mind spun with the possibilities, dancing on the edge of ruin. With a final look, she whispered, "And what's next for us?" "Let's find out together," he said, the fire in his voice igniting once more. Full of promise cloaked in danger. Scene 86, A World Apart. The rain fell in rhythmic sheets, each drop a desperate whisper on the polished slate of Laelani Sinclair's elegant front porch. Thick, humid air wrapped around her like an unwanted shawl as the night pressed down on her, suffocating yet intoxicating. The scent of rain mingled with the faint floral notes from her blooming jasmine, a delicate contrast to the spiraling chaos in her heart. Inside the opulent space, wooden panels gleamed under the soft glow of chandeliers, and the syncopated echo of thunder seemed to underscore her turmoil. Desmond Carver stood at the edge of the room, the faint light casting shadows across his defined features. His posture was tense, and for a moment he looked like a wild animal caught in a trap, both fierce and vulnerable. "Are you going to stay silent all night?" Laelani asked, her voice slightly cracking, her fingers toying with the edge of her scarf, grounding herself against the uncertainty that filled the air. Desmond's dark eyes fixed on her, piercing and unapologetic. "What do you want me to say, Laelani? That everything is fine? That this, whatever we have, can work in a world ruled by your husband's power?" "Not everything is so black and white," she shot back, anger flaring in her chest. "You know why I turned to you. My reality, it's not what I signed up for." "Reality doesn't care about your expectations," Desmond replied, stepping closer, the tension thickening between them. "It demands sacrifices, choices, consequences." A sudden gust of wind rattled the nearby windows, and Laelani felt the urgency between them morphing, shifting. "And are you willing to be one of those consequences?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. She caught the flicker of something indecipherable in his eyes. He stood silent, the weight of his decisions crashing down upon him. They were both ensnared in a realm where love could be as dangerous as it was liberating. Just a few feet away, Jenna, Laelani's spirited friend and a burgeoning journalist, sat in the living room. She adjusted her glasses, bemused by the charged atmosphere. "So, knock knock, anyone home? Looks like a storm's brewing. You two in here plotting a coup or something?" Jenna smirked, her tone lifted with mischief, but she sensed the tension in both of their silent fears. Laelani turned, grateful for Jenna's presence. "It's more complicated than that," she muttered. Jenna tilted her head, a spark of interest igniting. "Oh, good. Complicated is what makes life interesting." Then she looked over at Desmond, seemingly unfazed by his brooding presence. "What's your play, enigmatic driver? You must have something up your sleeve, right? Besides good looks?" Desmond let out a low chuckle, a brief moment of lightness breaking through the gloom. "As far as plays go, I'd say I'm just a pawn in a much bigger game." He glanced at Laelani, eyes flashing with an unspoken promise. The door creaked open, heralding the entrance of Malcolm, Laelani's husband, swaggering in with an air of authority. His presence shifted the atmosphere entirely, shadows masking the storm that had raged in the room until that very moment. "Didn't I say no visitors while I was out?" Malcolm's voice boomed, his gaze sweeping over the trio with an unsettling intensity. "Jenna, what are you doing here?" "I was just leaving," Jenna blurted, her vibrant demeanor flickering. She shot Laelani a warning glance, underscoring the unspoken rules of survival in Malcolm's world. "Laelani and I are going to have a drink." With a quick exit, she slipped out the door like a sprightly deer sensing the predator. Malcolm positioned himself closer to Laelani, a predatory smile playing on his lips. "We need to talk about your little art show," he said, his voice dropping to a low, insistent tone that sent shivers down her spine. "Things are changing." As he closed the distance, Laelani's heart raced, caught between her husband's power and the electric charge that simmered between her and Desmond. Each moment felt suspended, a crescendo of unspoken truths and choices yet to unfold. Desmond met her gaze, the tension between them igniting, a test of wills amid the storm. "Will you still listen when the storm breaks?" he asked softly, just loud enough for her to hear, the urgency of silence enveloping them both. Laelani swallowed, wrestling with her choices, with the encroaching darkness on the edges of her life, a world that felt full of secrets waiting to explode. "I don't know," she admitted. Her voice barely a whisper amid the encroaching chaos, a daring challenge in the face of uncertainty. Scene 87. The Price of Freedom. Desmond leaned against the dark wood railing of the balcony, his silhouette framed against the copper-hued twilight. "What's the price for freedom, Laelani?" he asked, his voice low, yet it cut through the evening air like a knife. He didn't face her, his gaze fixed on the sprawling city below, alive with energy but also fraught with shadows. Laelani stood still, her heart racing like a wild stallion. She could feel the tension coiling between them, an electric current that sparked from the air. "You think I haven't thought about that?" she replied, her brow furrowed. She crossed her arms, for once wishing she were wearing armor instead of the elegant dress that clung to her form. It emphasized her curves and the depth of her turmoil, a stark contrast to the poised exterior she'd upheld for so long. A tense silence settled, the city's distant sirens merging seamlessly with Laelani's rapid heartbeat. She kept her fists clenched, every fiber of her being drawn to him, but the fear of what lay ahead restrained her like chains. "You're suggesting we abandon everything, Desmond. Do you hear yourself?" At last, he turned, the setting sun casting shadows across his strong features. "Everything?" His tone was incredulous, a thinly veiled challenge. "What do you have, really? A gilded cage or a fleeting illusion of control?" His hands flexed at his sides, and she noticed how intensely he fought the trembling in his fingers. "Love shouldn't feel like a prison." Laelani's throat tightened as he stepped closer, invading her personal space, his breath warming her cheek. She looked up, searching for any hint of mockery in his dark eyes, but found only a visceral urgency. "You think love means sacrifice?" she finally whispered, barely able to contain the sorrow erupting within her. "What about the sacrifices that come from leaving?" Desmond was inches away now, their bodies nearly touching. She felt the warmth radiate from him, urgent and demanding. The sacrifice of a life half-lived? "Laelani, staying means drowning in a shallow pool of expectations." Tension danced between them, palpable and unyielding. Their gazes locked, and Laelani's stomach twisted. She saw flickers of pain reflected in Desmond's eyes, fragments of the darker secrets he'd kept. She could feel her heart warring with her mind, each pulse echoing the conflict enveloping them. "You're not the only one who's afraid." Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted as laughter erupted from within the house. It was a familiar sound, Laelani's sisters, Nia and Zara. They weren't merely enjoying a glass of wine. They were embroiled in playful arguments over the best way to handle a missing earring. Their voices collided in joyful chaos, a contrast to the simmering tension on the balcony. Desmond glanced back towards the open doors, his lips pressing into a thin line. "Maybe your sisters should hear us argue." There was a teasing spark in his eyes that almost melted her resolve. Laelani fought a smile, the tension, momentarily, ebbing away. "Their idea of a serious discussion is determining who took the last piece of cake." Shifted her weight, leaning against the railing, the coolness grounding her. Desmond chuckled softly, the sound rolling like thunder on a distant horizon. "Then let's give them a real scandal to work with." A daring challenge hung in the air between them. Adventure, danger, and the intoxicating sweetness of forbidden love. As her heart raced, Laelani couldn't ignore the threads of jealousy weaving through her. "And what would they say when they learn you've been driving me into your arms?" Her voice trembled, laced with vulnerability, mingling with the warmth of the evening air. The laughter inside crescendoed, their sisterly bond a beautiful contrast to the storm brewing outside. "They'll see the depth of your life, not just the surface." Desmond's eyes bored into hers, that magnetic allure drawing her closer against her better judgment. "You deserve more, Laelani. We deserve more." Her breath hitched at the unspoken promise shimmering in the space between them. She pondered, just for a moment, how freedom could feel. It tantalized her, a whisper of possibility laced with danger. What if freedom comes at a cost? Desmond leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper, the sincerity in every word echoing around them. What if it's the cost that truly sets us free? As the laughter inside faded, the impending silence loomed larger, binding them together in the quiet chaos of unspoken choices. The evening air crackled with tension ready to explode, ready to unravel. Scene 88. The ultimate sacrifice. A sharp chill cut through the otherwise stagnant air of the vehicle as Desmond glanced at Laelani sitting next to him. The late afternoon sun filtered the tinted windows, casting her in a golden hue that heightened the tension thrumming in the car. Desmond felt the weight of the day settling on his shoulders, threatening to crush him beneath its sheer gravity. How had it come to this? Every moment spent with Laelani had drawn him closer, yet the increasingly dangerous path he was chasing pushed them apart. "Desmond," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, weighted with concern as she turned to face him. "What are we doing?" He kept his gaze fixed on the road ahead, the distant horizon blurring with the surrounding greenery. "I have to confront him, Laelani." The resolve in his tone masked the volcano of doubt simmering within. The ticking countdown of events was rapidly approaching zero, and he couldn't afford to hesitate. She felt her heart constrict. "You're talking about my husband, Desmond. He's a monster, but he's still my husband." There was an unmistakable tremor in her voice, a vulnerability he had rarely seen. "Don't you want to be free of him?" The question hung in the air like smoke, intoxicating yet suffocating. Desmond's mind was set. This confrontation was inevitable. He needed her to understand. "What he does, it's not living, Laelani." The silence enveloped them, only punctuated by the sound of their synchronized breaths. She inhaled sharply, the scent of leather and cologne mingling in the small space between them. Laelani glanced out the window, pretending to admire the passing trees, but her mind raced. A torrent of memories, laughter, and love collided with guilt and fear. "What if he finds out? Then we deal with it together?" Desmond said, reaching across the console to gently grasp her hand, the warmth of his touch igniting a flicker of hope. "We'll figure a way out, we always do." She turned back to him, the gravity of those words sinking in. "What if it costs us everything?" Laelani's eyes searched his, pleading for reassurance she wasn't entirely sure she believed in. Desmond took a deep breath, his voice low. "At some point, you have to risk everything in order to gain your freedom." The tension was palpable as their gazes locked, emotions swirling between them like the shadows of an impending storm. He could feel her heartbeat quickening beneath his fingertips. Suddenly, the vibrancy of their intimacy dimmed as a sharp noise, a sudden slam against the trunk, shut them back into reality. Outside, the world morphed into chaos. A group of men, cloaked in shadows, were approaching their vehicle, faces obscured by hoods. Adrenaline surged through Desmond like fire. He pulled Laelani closer, anchoring her as he reached under his seat for the small pistol he kept hidden. "No," Laelani gasped, a frantic urgency in her eyes. "We can't, if you shoot." "I'm not letting them take you," he countered, his jaw clenched tightly. "Stay down." The car rocked slightly as their pursuers banged against the surface, a menacing rhythm echoing through their sanctuary. Desmond cracked the window, pointing the gun at the nearest threat, ready to defend what they had carved out of chaos itself. Laelani's heart raced in sync with his, aware of the precariousness of their situation. "Desmond, please. There has to be another way." Her essence enveloped him, her voice both a balm and a plea. "Sometimes you only get one choice," he replied, adrenaline infusing every syllable. Then, almost as if on cue, the door swung open, revealing a hulking figure with a menacing grin. The dim light of the setting sun glinted off his blade, a shimmer of foreboding. "Desmond Carver," he sneered. "Thought you could escape us?" In that moment, Desmond's heart tightened, but so did his resolve. He shifted himself in front of Laelani, ready to shield her with more than just words. "Let her go. This is between you and me." The laughter from the assailant echoed around them, filled with mocking disbelief. But as the chase spiraled into chaos, the silence of their contemplations shattered. They moved together instinctively, Laelani climbing over the console, while Desmond braced for impact. "Desmond!" she shouted, grounding him with her presence, even amidst the storm of fists and threats. With one last look at Laelani, Desmond realized it was never just about survival anymore. It was about their undeniable connection, a bond strong enough to challenge the darkness looming over them. "For you," he murmured with breathless intensity. "Always for you." Scene 89. Beyond the horizon. Laelani Sinclair stood in her modest kitchen, the sunlight filtering through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns onto the worn wooden countertop. A bowl of ripe fruit lay before her, an explosion of color that seemed to mock her monochrome existence. She absently picked up a plump peach, its skin warm and dimpled under her touch. The scent wafted up, sweet and intoxicating, evoking distant memories of laughter and carefree afternoons spent in the embrace of nature. Across the room, Desmond Carver leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his posture relaxed yet predatory, a coiled spring ready to burst. His presence filled the space, vibrant and electric, a reminder of the chaos swirling just beyond their modest hideaway. His gaze, intense and unwavering, tracked her movements, tracing the line of her body as if committing every curve and sway to memory. "Laelani," he called, his voice a low rumble that sent tremors of anticipation through her. "What's that you're thinking?" She hesitated, her jaw tightening. She could feel the weight of his scrutiny, drawing her deeper into the whirlpool of her emotions. "Just fruit," she replied, keeping her tone light, though the undertow of gravity tugged at her heart. "A peach," he noted, his brow arching with mischief. "Seems fitting. Sweet on the outside, but can leave a pit in your stomach if you bite down too hard." His eyes glimmered with understanding, and she fought to maintain her composure, turning her gaze back to the fruit. She sliced it carefully, each cut resonating in the stillness. The knife glided effortlessly through its flesh, releasing a cascade of juices that dripped slowly onto the cutting board, as if mirroring the slow trickle of her thoughts. There was something almost sacred in the act, a ritual to stave off the chaos brewing outside. Desmond pushed himself off the frame and crossed the kitchen in 3 long strides, his cadence a blend of purpose and restraint. He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a murmur. "Are you sure that's all you're thinking about?" She looked up, eyes locking onto his, the distance between them practically pulsating with unspoken tension. "Maybe I'm just wondering if a piece of fruit can solve our problems," she quipped, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips, masking the tempest within. "Only if you share it with someone." He leaned closer still, the warmth of his presence igniting a myriad of imprints across her skin. For a moment it felt like they were suspended in a world that held no danger and no deceit, only the vibrant chaos of passion. Just then, a loud crash from the living room shattered the fragile stillness, snapping them both back to reality. Laelani flinched, momentarily drawing the knife too close to her hand. "Stay here," Desmond commanded, his tone firmly laced with authority. He turned sharply, stride purposeful as he headed toward the commotion, instinctively slipping into the role of protector. In the adjoining room, a primal scene unfolded. The older members of the Sinclair household were embroiled in a heated argument. Laelani's brother Marcus, his usually calm demeanor frayed, gestured wildly toward the door where their mother Etta stood, arms crossed defiantly. "You're meddling in things you don't understand, Marcus. We have responsibilities," she fired back, her voice rising, a mix of frustration and maternal instinct. "Responsibilities that could get us killed, Mom. You're too blind to see it." Marcus shot back, eyes flashing with a tempest of loyalty and defiance. Laelani stepped forward, uncertainty knitting her brow. "What's going on?" she interjected, trying to diffuse the tension. Etta's gaze softened when it landed on Laelani, but only momentarily. "There are whispers, Laelani. People are talking about your husband. They believe he's expanding his operations. It's dangerous." Desmond returned just in time to hear the last part, his features hardening as he joined Laelani's side. The air crackled with unspoken implications, the walls suddenly closing in. Whatever sordid world they aimed to escape was now weaving itself back into their lives, enveloping them with a vice-like grip. "Whispers don't kill," he remarked coolly, a methodical calm beneath rising stakes. "But the truth can shatter everything." Laelani turned to him, torn between these familial ties and the pull of her heart. All around her, the room pulsed with the weight of their shared dilemmas and the horizon they reached for, a future filled with both hope and peril. "Desmond," she began, her voice laced with urgency. He intercepted her gaze, the intensity amplified, grounding her in the storm. "Then let's find out together," he said, defiantly. With their fates entwined deeper than ever, they stood ready, facing not only the chaos outside, but the storm brewing within. As the argument escalated around them, it was one undeniable truth resonating in the midst of turmoil. They were bound by something greater than themselves, each moment pulling them closer to the edge of revelation. Beyond the horizon lay a world where they could either thrive or fall into the depths of darkness, a gamble neither was willing to avoid any longer. Scene 90, Clash of Titans. The air buzzed with tension as droplets of rain fell, drumming against the pavement in rhythmic bursts. Laelani stood against the sleek contours of Desmond's car, her gaze darting toward the shadows lurking in the alleyway. "What if they find out?" she said, her voice laced with a defiance that masked an undercurrent of fear. For a moment, the world around her seemed suspended, the whispering rain intensifying her heartbeat. Desmond's brow furrowed, the weight of secrets hanging palpably between them. "We don't have that kind of time. They're already here," he replied, his tone a mix of urgency and soft assurance. He leaned closer, his presence a shield against the storm, both outside and within. The scent of wet asphalt mixed with his cologne strong, intoxicating, a reminder of the power he wielded, not just in an emotional sense, but in the dangerous game they played. Without warning, a group of men emerged from the shadows, their faces obscured by the hoods of their jackets. Laelani's pulse quickened at the sight. She could see the glint of metal under the streetlights, a promise of violence threatening to disrupt everything they had fought for. "Let's get out of here," Desmond urged, reaching for her wrist with a touch that sent a shiver up her spine. "Where?" "They'll only follow us," she countered, her eyes fierce despite the uncertainty swirling in her mind. "I thought you wanted to take control of your life," he said, his dark eyes searching hers, igniting a spark that left her breathless. She could almost hear the drumbeat of her heart against the background of the escalating storm. Nearby, Juniper Collins and Marvin Tate stood near the entrance of the bar across the street, sipping their drinks but now caught in the maelstrom of confusion. Juniper's gaze was fixed intently on the confrontation. "They're going to do something stupid," she muttered, her dark curls bouncing as she instinctively edged forward, despite Marvin's grip on her elbow. "Let them be. They have to learn," Marvin replied, pragmatic but aware of the tension thickening the air. His sharp suit and clean-cut appearance spoke of responsibility, but his deepening frown belied the chaos he sensed was coming. As Laelani shook her head, she felt the rush of adrenaline. When does it stop being about my husband's empire and start being about us? She stepped closer to Desmond, a fiery intensity igniting her cheeks. The clash of ambition and desire played out in their entwined expressions. "Tonight," he replied, his voice a low promise. "But you have to trust me fully." Just then, the first of the men approached, his confident stride cutting through the rain like a knife. He had the smug air of someone who enjoyed the chaos he created. "Laelani," he called out, the name dripping from his lips like venom. "Don't you think it's time to go home?" Desmond tightened his grip on Laelani, a subtle blend of protective ferocity and protective longing. "Not a chance, Marcus," he said, his tone shifting, his demeanor sharpening. The conversation spiraled from fear into tension, an intricate dance of power, the sky growing darker above them. "Ah, playing the hero now, are we?" Marcus chuckled, the sound mocking against the backdrop of rain. "You think she's safe with you? You're nothing but a distraction." Laelani felt the tension crackle like static before a storm and stepped forward defiantly. "You underestimate me. You always have." Her voice pierced the confrontation, cutting through the responses of the others. Marcus smirked, his gaze sweeping over her and Desmond with an air of judgment. "Underestimating your loyalty, Laelani? Or are you merely a pawn in his game?" At that moment, movement erupted from the shadows. More figures lurked behind the first man, a flurry of body language that spoke of violence looming on the horizon. Desmond positioned himself in front of Laelani, a statue of resolve, fist-balled, confrontational yet grounding her in their shared purpose. "Enough, Marcus. This ends now," Desmond commanded, his voice echoing, a thunderclap amidst the downpour, filled with a fierce promise that left no room for doubt. As the stakes elevated, a sudden flash illuminated the distant skyline, and for that fleeting moment, Laelani felt the rush of desire mingling with the fear. The battle was not just for survival, it was about claiming their lives. Would they walk away from this day together, or would the darkness fracture them apart? With heartbeats racing and tension escalating, the world around them poised itself for an irreversible shift, destiny twisting frantically beneath the stormy sky. Scene 91. Conscious choices. Laelani stood at the threshold of her expansive studio, sunlight spilling through the tall windows, illuminating the chaotic splashes of color that adorned her canvases. The air was thick with the smell of oil paint, mixed with the faint, heady scent of turpentine. She longed for clarity amid the tumult of her heart. The colors swirling around her, reflecting the chaos that had invaded her once methodical life. Each day felt like walking a tightrope strung high above an abyss of conflicting emotions. As she stepped further into the room, her fingers brushed the edge of a half-finished painting, a vibrant swirl of blues and yellows, a representation of the freedom she yearned for but had not yet grasped. Desmond's voice echoed in her mind, filled with passion and urgency. Being tied to someone doesn't mean you have to surrender your dreams, Laelani. His words floated like a tether, pulling her deeper into an internal struggle that felt all too visceral. The sound of swift, deliberate footsteps interrupted her thoughts. Desmond entered, his presence electric, bringing an urgency that jolted her from her reverie. He wore a slight smirk, tinged with mischief, as he surveyed her workspace, a balance of awe and desire etched on his handsome features. "Should I be worried that you're blending your emotions with your art?" Desmond teased, crossing his arms as he leaned against the doorframe. The way the sunlight outlined his silhouette gave him an almost mythical aura, stirring something wild within her. "Only if you're afraid of getting splattered," Laelani replied with a wry smile, her heart racing as their eyes locked. "What brings you here today? I thought you'd be busy plotting your next move." "The world doesn't stop just because I'm playing chauffeur," he countered, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial tone. "And as it turns out, fortune favors the bold." Laelani drew a shaky breath, the air thickening with tension as she considered the enormity of their current situation, Desmond's secret mission to undermine her husband, the looming danger, the unspoken connection that tethered them both. Just as she was about to press him for answers, the sound of screeching tires outside shattered the fragile atmosphere. Desmond's expression shifted instantly, alert and wary. "They found us," he said, sharp and quick, his playful demeanor evaporating. "We need to move." Her heart raced, and she felt a surge of panic. "What do you mean? We can't just—" "We don't have time to argue." He stepped back, urgency radiating from him as they heard the voices outside, a low rumble of danger encroaching upon their sanctuary. Before she could respond, he grabbed her arm, guiding her toward the small back staircase that led to the hidden exit. As they hurried down the narrow steps, adrenaline flooded her senses, momentarily pushing aside the simmering tension between them. In the darkness, she felt the warmth of his hand against hers, a fleeting grounding amid the turmoil. It was then that she caught a glimpse of vulnerability in his eyes, a flicker of fear that made her heart ache. "Desmond," she whispered, stopping suddenly, her heart pounding in her chest. "If we get out of this, will you promise me something?" He turned, the weight of her question hanging in the air. "What is it?" "Will you promise to tell me the truth? About everything. About you. About us." His gaze bore into hers, the fierce intensity mingled with something softer behind those dark eyes. It felt like the world paused around them, the danger outside momentarily forgotten. "Laelani, we might not make it out of here." "Then what do we have to lose?" she pressed, desperation seeping into her voice. "I need to know if this is real." For a brief moment, vulnerability softened the edges of his sharp demeanor. "It's real, Laelani, but the truth is only part of what we're fighting against right now. They'll come for us." The sound of footsteps grew closer, mixed with an echo of laughter that chilled her blood. Weighed down by the certainty of their predicament, she took a deep breath, grounding herself in reality while longing for the connection that pulsed between them. "Then let's make every moment count," she replied, voice steady, slipping her hand into his. "We run together." Together they emerged into the alley, shadows converging as chaos erupted, the blaring horns of waiting cars, shouts echoing off the brick walls, and a rush of figures surging through. Here, amid the cacophony, they knew one thing: love and survival intermingled in a perilous dance, and it was their choice to step into the fray. Desmond squeezed her hand, unwavering, No matter what happens next, we face it together. With that promise, they plunged into the storm that awaited them, propelled by clarity forged in desperation. The world had shifted underfoot, but their resolve stood firm against the tide of uncertainty. Scene 92. Big decisions. The rain drummed against the polished wood of the terrace, each droplet a soft yet urgent reminder of the gravity looming overhead. Laelani Sinclair stood near the edge, her fingers tracing the contours of a delicate, hand-painted vase. It swayed slightly with the breeze, silent, mirroring her inner turmoil. Would you choose loyalty or freedom if it meant losing everything? Desmond Carver's voice cut through the sounds of the storm, anchoring her momentarily. He stepped forward, his striking figure framed by the flickering candlelight that danced on the table between them. Laelani turned, her expression a blend of longing and conflict. Freedom feels like a dream, Desmond, but what happens when reality shatters it? As her words hung in the air, the garden around them seemed to join in the conversation, petals clinging desperately to their stems, leaves trembling as if to escape the weight of the question. Shadows flickered in the candlelight, teasing the edges of their uncertainty. Desmond's gaze held hers, fierce yet tender, the storm outside amplifying the tempest within. "You're stronger than you know. Whatever choice you make, it should be yours and yours alone," he said, stepping closer, the warm scent of cedar and rain melding with the faint hint of lavender on her skin. "What if that choice puts us both in danger?" Laelani asked, her voice trembling slightly, vulnerability creeping into her tone. "Danger is part of life. It's the price we pay for wanting something real," he replied, his voice low and urgent, a heartbeat sinking between them amid the chaotic downpour. He reached out, brushing the back of his fingers against her arm, igniting a cascade of sensations that surged through her veins. From inside the estate, a raucous laughter erupted. It was Benjamin, Laelani's husband, holding court with his usual entourage, Gretchen, his bubbly confidante, Marcus, the imposing enforcer, and Tasha, always quick with a joke that belied her keen insight. Their voices, loud and boisterous against the tension outside, formed a dissonance that echoed in Laelani's heart. "Let's toast to friendship and betrayal." Benjamin's laughter rang out, followed by the clinking of glasses, a sound that stung. The phrase danced mockingly in Laelani's mind. To whom was the toast directed? "Do you think they suspect?" Laelani murmured, glancing back toward the open doors where warm light spilled out, illuminating the figures inside. Desmond's brow furrowed. If they did, they wouldn't be celebrating. They're blissfully ignorant, caught in their own little games. There was a raw honesty in his tone that struck deep, igniting a flicker of courage within her. "Games that could cost us everything," she said softly, met with a silence that spoke volumes. "I can't." "Give up what we've found together?" Desmond interjected, his frustration palpable, each word a challenge. "You're more than just your husband's shadow, Laelani. Don't let him define your worth." The rain fell harder, each drop a rapid-fire question to the universe. Laelani stepped closer to Desmond, the warmth of his body radiating toward her, a sanctuary amidst the chaos. Their eyes locked, the air shimmering with unspoken promises and desperation. "I want to break free," she whispered, the words slipping from her lips like a prayer. "But I also fear losing what little safety I have." Desmond leaned in, his breath a soft caress on her cheek. "Then let's forge a new path together. You dictate where it goes." With that, the world outside faded, and the two of them were enveloped in a fragile moment of sincerity, the chaos around them transforming into a quiet resolve. Suddenly, a loud crash broke through the night, followed by Gretchen's voice raised in alarm. "What was that?" Laelani's heart raced as Desmond cupped her cheek, bringing her attention back to the moment, grounding her amidst the swirling uncertainty. "If we're going to make a decision, it has to be now." His eyes sparkled with determination, an urgent vow. The rain continued its relentless dance, but inside, Laelani felt the stirrings of empowerment, her choice looming ahead like a beacon through the storm. "Then let's make it count," she said, her voice steady, the promise of the moment woven into her words. Scene 93, The Rising Tide. Laelani stood in the expansive kitchen, vibrant sunlight streaming through the large bay windows, casting playful patterns on the marble countertop. She moved meticulously, chopping fresh herbs, parsley, and basil defiant against the tension that crackled in the air. The aromas of garlic and olive oil began to blend, a fragrant distraction from the whirlwind of her thoughts. Each slice of the knife resonated like a heartbeat, echoing a desire that she had long denied. Desmond leaned against the kitchen doorframe, his arms crossed, exuding an effortless charisma. He watched her work, his intense gaze tracing the rhythm of her movements with a barely concealed admiration. "You know, for someone who claims to be just a driver, you put an awful lot of passion into this," he teased, his voice low and teasingly playful. Laelani glanced up, a flicker of something between them igniting. "It's not about the driving, Desmond. It's about having something to connect with outside of, well, everything else." Her fingers hesitated mid-chop, lifting to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The semi-reveal of her neck was not lost on him, his breath caught for just a moment. "You could say that it's easier to chop herbs than to slice through lies," he said, stepping closer, his presence an enticing weight in the small room. The space felt charged, filled with unspoken words and shared secrets, a familiar tension threading itself between them. "Lies?" Laelani quirked an eyebrow, trying to infuse levity into the gravity of the moment. "If I remember correctly, you're the one who thrives on all this mystery." Desmond leaned over the counter, his expression shifting from playful to sincere. "We're all tangled in our own mysteries. Some just have higher stakes." He paused, the air thick with lingering implications. "Wouldn't it be easier if we just faced the truth?" An unexpected vulnerability pierced Laelani's carefully constructed façade. She turned back to the herbs, her heart racing, the clattering of the knife against the board failing to mask the surge of emotions building within her. "Is that what you want? My truth?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Desmond stepped back, the light catching his features, illuminating the determination etched in his brow. "I want you to be free, Laelani, free, to choose without fear." His words hung heavily between them, a tether that tightened the more they engaged with each other. Meanwhile, in the living room, Marina, Laelani's best friend and confidant, poured herself a cup of steaming tea. Throwing a glance towards the kitchen, she bit back a grin as she overheard the soft tension-filled banter. "Those two are going to combust," she muttered, shaking her head as she poured another cup for Darnell, Marina's own partner, who was seated on the couch, flipping through channels absent-mindedly. "Let them," Darnell chuckled, eyes still glued to the TV. "It's about time Laelani picked something and someone worth her while." "Someone? You mean the dangerous driver?" Marina teased, a flicker of concern crossing her face. "You really think this is just a phase for her?" Darnell shrugged, taking a sip of his tea. "Could be, but it doesn't matter if the apple's bruised as long as it tastes good." He smirked, which coaxed a laugh out of Marina despite her worries. Back in the kitchen, Laelani felt a rush of heat creeping up her neck. "You think I am afraid of fire?" she challenged, voice rising, laced with an energetic defiance. "Tell me, Desmond, what do you know of scalding pain?" "I know it all too well," Desmond shot back, stepping closer, their bodies mere inches apart. The scent of the basil mingled with the hint of musk from his cologne, overwhelming yet intoxicating. "I've bled deeply for my choices." Silence hung as they absorbed the weight of his admission. Laelani's heart raced. They were tiptoeing on a tightrope of vulnerability. She felt the gravity of the moment, a culmination of tension, need, and understanding. Without thinking, she reached out, brushing her fingertips across his forearm, and the electric spark ignited. "I can't," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The intensity of his stare held her captive, the world outside their kitchen fading into a distant hum. Desmond held her gaze, capturing the essence of their shared uncertainty and undeniable connection. "You can, Laelani. You just have to let go." In that moment, the swirling chaos of their lives outside faded, and the tides of their choices drew them closer, closer still, until nothing mattered but the space between them and the storm brewing just beyond the kitchen walls. Embracing vulnerability. Laelani stood in the dim light of the kitchen, the gentle hum of the refrigerator creating a steady backdrop to her thoughts. The scent of fresh rosemary lingered in the air, mingling with the faint sweetness of the last batch of pastries she'd made for a neighborhood gathering that now felt so far away. She kneaded the dough slowly, her fingers guiding it with a tenderness that she wished she could channel into her own life. Across the room, Desmond leaned against the door frame, his presence both grounding and electrifying. He watched her, a poignant mix of admiration and concern playing across his face. The intimate silence wrapped around them, thickening the air with unspoken words. "Laelani," Desmond said softly, breaking the pause, his voice a warm whisper that ignited a flicker of hope within her. "You know, the way you create, it's like watching a story unfold." He looked at her hands, dusted with flour, and added, "It's beautiful." She paused, her breath catching slightly. The compliment hung between them like a beacon. "And yet I feel like I'm caught in a narrative I did not choose," she admitted, her heart racing. She dropped her gaze, suddenly shy, the dough forgotten under her deft fingers. "Every stroke of my brush feels like a lie these days." Desmond took a step closer, the quiet confidence in his demeanor making him irresistibly magnetic. "What if you rewrote that narrative? What if you embraced the rawness of it?" He reached for a sprig of rosemary, brushing against her hand, sending a warm tingle all the way up her arm. "What does that even mean?" she replied, but her voice was barely a whisper, the question hanging on the edge of a smile. Desmond's eyes gleamed with intensity, as if he could see past her carefully painted façade. "It means being brave enough to express your truth, even if it hurts." "We're all wounded in some way," he said, his tone deepening, evoking the weight of their shared secrets. "But vulnerability can be powerful. Let me show you." With every word, he pulled her closer to him, bridging the gap that fear and duty had formed. The tension crackled between them, a magnetic force drawing them in. Laelani felt a whirlwind of emotions rise within her, yearning, fear, hope combining into a beautiful chaos. "What if it destroys everything?" she breathed, her heart hammering. "What if it doesn't?" His honesty surprised her. The daring sparkle in his deep brown eyes radiated a warmth that enveloped her, making her forget the shadows that loomed just beyond the walls of this room. Before she could venture further into the depths of her worries, Desmond reached out and brushed a stray hair back from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek. The gentleness of his touch was electric, sparking a fire deep within her that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. In that moment, the world felt impossibly small, and their connection intensified like a masterful crescendo of an unfinished symphony. "Just one moment, Laelani," he whispered, leaning in slightly, his breath a whisper against her lips. "Just allow yourself to feel." Something shifted inside her, a fragile unlocking of doors she had kept closed for far too long. With a tentative heart, she closed the distance between them, driven by an instinct that felt both foreign and familiar. Just as their lips brushed gently, the serenity shattered. "Desmond!" A voice cut through the moment, Maya, Laelani's mother, sauntering into the kitchen, her voice laced with unintentional interruption. With a dramatic flourish, she seemed oblivious to the charged atmosphere. "Have you seen the kids? They were supposed to be setting the table. I swear, they're as scatterbrained as your father." Laelani pulled away, cheeks flushed, embarrassment rushing in with the abruptness of her mother's entrance. She shot a glare at Desmond, who stood frozen, mouth a thin line of suppressed laughter as he glanced from Laelani to Maya. Yes, about the table," Desmond started, scratching the back of his head, expertly shifting his demeanor to the charming persona that everyone adored. A playful smile broke through as he leaned against the counter, affecting nonchalance. "They might be building an elaborate fortress instead." "Honestly," Maya exclaimed with exasperation, roll of her eyes instantaneously dispelling the earlier tension in the air. "Kids these days." Laelani caught Desmond's eye, and they both exchanged a look that said everything their voices didn't. With laughter bubbling just beneath the surface, she turned back to her dough, secretly grateful for the reprieve. Yet even as the mundane returned, the echo of that unfinished moment lingered, a tantalizing promise waiting to be embraced. Desmond leaned closer again, a smile playing on his lips as he murmured just for her, "We'll pick this up later." And in her heart, an affirmation grew, whispering back, "I want to." Scene 95. Through the fire. The humid air weighed heavily on Laelani Sinclair as she prepared her easel outside their lavish estate. An unwelcome reminder of the tensions roiling within her marriage. She could feel the storm's electricity threading through the air, building with every passing moment. Clouds loomed overhead, dark and heavy, threatening to spill their burdens at any moment, much like her own festering secrets. Taking a steadying breath, she squeezed paint from the tubes onto her palette, each vivid color a testament to her confusion, her passion, and her sorrow. Just then, Desmond Carver, her enigmatic driver, strolled into view, the lines of his fit physique sharply outlined by the overcast light. He wore a t-shirt that clung unnecessarily tight, and beneath that casual exterior, she could sense the storm brewing inside him too. Their eyes met, and for a brief second, the world fell away. The unspoken tension, the wild, unpredictable spark they had shared, was palpable between them. "Working on your masterpiece, Laelani," Desmond teased lightly, though his eyes narrowed as if scanning for the deeper truths she tethered within herself. "Is that what it is?" She turned away, determined to focus on the canvas, but aware of his presence cutting through her thoughts like a knife. Or just another distraction? Desmond leaned against a nearby tree, his arms crossing over his chest. "You're avoiding the real issue, you know. We can paint until the sun goes down, but it won't change the fact that you're hiding from what's about to unfold." "Is it hiding if I know exactly what I'm doing?" Laelani replied, her voice losing its luster as she dipped her brush into the paint, the bright hue reflecting her internal clash. She could feel the convergence of emotions, the guilt, the anger, the undeniable attraction that was both intoxicating and terrifying. Desmond stepped closer, the underlying tension crackling like the atmospheric charge before a storm. "You think that painting can shield you? From your husband? From me? From the choices you'll have to make in the end?" And like that, the atmosphere shifted. Laelani looked at him then, really looked, deep into his piercing eyes that seemed to read her every thought. "You don't truly know me, Desmond. You see what's on the surface, but beneath is where the real story lies," he interrupted, his voice low and intense. "What are you willing to sacrifice for that story?" The wind picked up, swirling around them, tossing splatters of paint across her canvas, splashes of red like spilled blood and blue skies that never felt attainable. "I have spent too long sacrificing pieces of myself for a life I didn't choose," she admitted, the words coming out harsh and unfiltered. "Maybe I'm tired of being the perfect wife. Maybe I'm tired of pretending." "You're not just pretending. You're lying to yourself, Laelani." Desmond's voice held a weight she found both infuriating and liberating. "You think I wanted to be your driver? Just to be on the sidelines while your husband plays king of his criminal kingdom? You think I'm doing this for myself?" Their eyes locked, his fierce and unwavering, hers smoldering with unspoken desire and suppressed fears. An unyielding silence hung between them, the hum of the world around them fading into the background. "Maybe you've been drawn into this life as much as I have," Laelani whispered, inching toward him, breathless with possibility. "But my husband, is there no chance it could get better? Is there no hope?" "Hope when everything we've built is so fragile." Desmond stepped even closer, their faces almost touching, the storm echoing their emotional turmoil. "I came here to help you escape that prison. What if that's already in motion? What if the fight is already in progress?" "Then let's not fight against each other anymore," she said, her heart racing, flickers of longing igniting behind her fear. "I won't be the reason you lose everything, Laelani. Not that. Not when there's so much at stake." Desmond's rough palm brushed against her cheek, and it felt electric, grounding, yet wildly intoxicating. "I need you to trust me," she breathed, feeling the rumbles of distant thunder align with her own turbulent emotions. "Trust is just another word for vulnerability," Desmond murmured softly, enough for her to feel, to understand. "And right now, we are standing on the edge of everything." With a rush of wind, the first drops of rain began to fall, punctuating the fragile moment. Desmond leaned in, the tension between them peaking as the storm raged on. "Then let's leap together," Laelani whispered, taking a breath, resolved for whatever storm awaited them ahead. Scene 96. Fateful Decisions. The crisp air in Laelani's studio felt heavy with unspoken tension, intermingled with the scent of linseed oil and wet canvas. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward Desmond, who stood across the room, arms crossed. "What were you thinking, Laelani?" His voice was both incredulous and gentle, a delicate thread of accusation woven into concern. Laelani turned, her palette knife poised mid-air, droplets of paint glistening like jewels. I had to see him, she replied, defiant yet vulnerable, her pulse quickening at the memory of her husband's icy stare. You can't understand. Understand what? That you'd risk everything? Your safety? Your future with me? Desmond's tone sharpened as silence hovered between them, so thick it could be cut. He stepped forward, the light casting an ethereal glow around his frame, and it almost softened the edges of their argument. A shuddering breath escaped Laelani's lips as she dropped the palette knife. Everything I try to escape pulls me back in, and then there's you. Her voice trembled, emotions cascading, fears spilling over. What do I want, Desmond? I hate that I can't seem to decide. Across town, Asha, Laelani's friend and confidant, was deep in her own turmoil. At the cafe, she nervously stirred her coffee, eyeing the door as if it held secrets. He hasn't called, Asha. He hasn't even tried, Ray said, her voice quaking as she recounted another unsettling night spent alone. Maybe give him time. This is bigger than we realize, Asha urged, her eyes darting toward the window. But if Desmond is involved, it could be dangerous for everyone. Ray pursed her lips. Disbelief painted across her face. I'd rather have him call when he's ready than be caught up in something I can't even see. Back in the dimly lit studio, Laelani found strength in Desmond's gaze, no longer just an alluring devil, but a partner in this unpredictable labyrinth. You're asking me to choose between you and the life I've built, she said, her tone softening. How could I face the world if I lose my art, my place? I'm not asking you to pick a side, Laelani, but I can't be your safety net, he replied, stepping closer, his breath coming in slow, measured pulls. I can't bear watching you drown in a sea of loyalty and regrets. The air thickened again, a pause of complex emotions filling the silence with electricity. She wrapped her arms around herself, longing to embrace the warmth that Desmond offered, but overwhelmed by the uncharted waters surrounding them.